Hello, listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 272. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me is Trace Sauveur.
Hey, Ryan.
Trace, you're back already.
Yeah, I came back.
I didn't scare you off?
No, I had a good time doing my little capsule review for the end of 2024, and I thought I should do this for longer. And so
Okay.
I
So you weren't too scared of a spreadsheet anymore to sign up your name.
what's funny is I like my day job. I work in spreadsheets all day, but the Awards Watch podcast sign up spreadsheet does scare me because I'm like, oh man, I can't sign up to talk about this stuff. And so then I look at it for 30 seconds and then I just close it.
Because it's like commitment. Like you got to sign up and then like you're on it. It's like when you're at like when I'm at work and I get signed up for something and and I'm like, I really don't want to do it. And then and you build the dread. But this is harmless. This is fun. We're here to talk about movies.
Nothing wrong with this.
You know, there's all this like Oscar stuff going on right now. The season's in full swing. And the nominations just came out. We had an episode last week about the nominations with Eric, Sophia, and myself. So if you want to go listen to that on our reactions, go do that. But we're going back to what we usually do around here, which is we talk about new releases and what they tie into the week. And we're doing even a throwback. We're doing a top 5 today, which I'm really excited about. Because Trace, there's a new movie by this guy named Steven Soderbergh.
Yep.
This director that I find to be one of the most fascinating directors in Hollywood.
I agree.
That is currently working and has been working for like the last. I mean, it's coming up on 40 years. At the end of the decade, he'll be at 40 years in the industry, which is crazy when you think about it. But anyway, we're here to talk about his new film Presence, which is distributed by Neon, was out at Sundance last year. And it's funny that Sundance is going on right now. And this is when this movie is being released.
Mm-hmm.
And it is sort of a supernatural ghost story centered around a family inside a house. And the whole film is, at least from the camera's perspective, is shot from the perspective of the spirit that is haunting or around, I wouldn't say haunting, around the family there in this house. Trace,
Yes.
Before we get into Presence and our top 5 Soderberghs, talk about that later. Soderbergh as a director for you, what's your relationship with him? When did you first kind of get introduced to him, and what about him sort of intrigues you as a moviegoer?
So I couldn't tell you when I became, 'cause he's such a prolific director, right? And he's such a wide range of stuff that he has worked on. Very, omnivorous type of director, kind of working in every single genre you could imagine, working on indies, working on like 4-quadrant blockbusters. So like he's kind of been everywhere. And I don't know when in my film fandom I really became like aware of him as a director. I remember seeing Contagion in theaters back in the day, but that was before I really like knew movies all that well. And I just like was seeing it as a movie. But that very well may have been the first Steven Soderbergh movie I ever saw, because I don't know whenever I caught up with the Ocean's movie or anything. But as a film fan now, he's not a director that ever, if anyone ever like asked me, hey, who are your favorite directors? He's not someone that really comes to mind as someone to bring up, but like he is such like a solid force as a filmmaker. And everything he does is so rock solid, and especially in his post-retirement era, I really enjoy all the experimentation he's been doing, especially in regards to, I think he's one of our most innovative people working behind the camera, literally as his own cinematographer most of the time. And so many of his newer movies, I'm really enjoying just seeing like whatever like new wacky experiment he's kind of cooking up, even if it doesn't like totally come to fruition. I just think it's always interesting to see a new Steven Soderbergh movie.
I agree. He is someone that I think of in terms of versatility within being an auteur. And from the beginning of his career, he's been pushing the medium forward.
Mm-hmm.
He's always doing something interesting. I would not consider him like one of my guys. Like he is not like, if I had to live and die on a hill, it is, and say, do you consider Steven Soderbergh to be a top 10 director for you all time? No. But I am drawn to him like a moth to a flame every time he has a new movie come out. I feel like every time he has something new, and then I start liking like a string of releases from him, like 4 or 5 movies in a row, and then I'm like, wait a minute, maybe he is one of my guys, and I'm just a dick and don't want to actually admit it. And then he'll have like a movie where like I don't agree with at all, like you know what I mean. And we'll talk about maybe a couple of those duds,
Yeah,
see if you have any on your list. Um, but then I'm like, oh, okay, well this guy is like not as perfect as other directors that have more perfect filmographies or don't have a bump in the road. But then he'll go back on a run again, and so it's like
and
for every one bad one he makes like 4 or 5 that I'm like, this is either really great or this is like a solid piece of entertainment that is better than half of the schlock we get throughout a normal year. So
absolutely.
it is very funny that he has one of the first big releases of the year or one of the first like releases of the year, and it's like in a world where we have like 4 or 5 already like middle of the road, sort of films that have already come out. It's like one of the top ones already on the top of the heap for the year.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I was gonna say even like even Soderbergh's duds, I think are like, I think there's a value there because of his proclivity for experimentation.
Mhm.
Oftentimes if something's a dud, it's because he's like trying something new and he's just always kind of putting on a new hat in terms of movie in terms of storytelling. And yeah, I mean that's very true here with Presence as well. Him just kind of like kind of taking his role, his multifaceted role behind the camera again as director slash cinematographer slash editor, as he often is for a lot of his movies, and delivering something that's even something that's outside of his wheelhouse once again, seemingly because he's never done a straight horror movie like this, and certainly never done any kind of like POV style cinema before. And so yeah, it's just I definitely classify Presence as one of his, again, one of his kind of late period, like neato little experimentations where I'm just happy to go out and see whatever the hell he's kind of tinkering with now.
No, for sure. Well, we're here to might as well talk about his latest film, which is Presence, and it's had some pretty good reviews out of Sundance last year, and I believe it also premiered a little bit at some other festivals. I think it hit Toronto last year too, and so it's been kind of just lingering around
Like a
and
presence.
like a presence in the film year, and didn't know when they were going to release it. Neon picked this one up. It's a $2 million budget, made like 3.5, close to 4 this week. So like good for it. Made a little decent amount of money. Horror movies are kind of, or ghost stories or possession movies or whatever you want to call it. The genre is popping right now, Trace. And so to get a movie like this from Soderbergh is very interesting, very different film. Obviously, even in like a more different film than what was like In a Violent Nature, which is like another movie last year that's from the perspective of a killer. So we've seen movies like this before. So it's not like too out of the realm in terms of the just the conception on paper. But it's a Soderbergh movie, so it defies expectations as well too. So,
Yep.
for yourself, sir, I know you saw this yesterday. Yesterday, yes. What did you think about Soderbergh's latest film?
I think it's mo- I think it's mostly a very cool experiment. I don't know if I love it 100% as a like rock solid movie, especially with some aspects of the script that kind of left me wanting just a little bit more. But as just like a really neat formal exercise, I just like I said, I just love showing up and watching whatever new image Soderbergh is like really cooking up. And I think it's funny I when I was watching it, the first thing I thought it was this is basically intensifying the idea behind In a Violent Nature last year, where it's giving the perspective to kind of the invading entity that is stalking the de facto antagonist of a horror movie. It's giving that the point of view, and so it's kind of doing the same thing where it's revealing the nature of that is that that entity does a lot of like watching and waiting, and that's kind of the extent of the movie. And to that end, I think it's kind of funny that this movie is being marketed as a horror movie so hard when it is not really a horror movie, I would argue, and more of a supernaturally tinged kind of movie that's more about like the domestic drama unfolding within this family. And because of that, I think this maybe needed a stronger script to be totally satisfying. But I, again, just really enjoyed this mostly as a kind of an experiment, and mostly positive on it. But we can kind of get more into some of the issues I had with, some of what the script does and some of the character dynamics and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I kind of went in knowing very little, if that makes sense. Um, like, I tried to go in as little as possible because of the fact that I had just kind of heard the central like get in premise. And sometimes these movies can also be a little challenging to get through when you have a sort of lack of a better word, a gimmick to get you in. Like it was a little bit
Hmm.
of a struggle last year for me until a rewatch for something like Nickel Boys, which is an entirely different process and an entirely different way of delivering a system like this, or In a Violent Nature, a much different sort of delivery system than this. Or even, other films that have done it from a first person's perspective, or even just movies like this that then you have to find their own rules within inside of it. And that was kind of, I think, the thing that I found interesting about this is like this movie wanted to be a conventional horror story or a spirit story, a ghost story, but its rules in which it's set up seemed to be kind of aimless and not as precise because it does things here that almost have like a I know this is going to sound weird, almost has like a tenant like understanding of how time and what this all means, like the cycle that we see throughout the film and what the
Sure.
entity can do. And then we're kind of making it up as we go, and we don't really have a rules to it. It's more like a just go with it kind of vibe with it, which is honestly, that's okay. But the movie doesn't kind of want to at times play like that. It feels like it's when it starts manipulating with when this is all occurring and it's all about something that hasn't happened yet, without giving too much away, it starts getting a little too muddy for itself. Now, the family drama at the core of it is a very fascinating one. I think, I think Chris Sullivan is really great in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think Lucy Liu is great opposite him. I think the kids are a little like hit or miss, but like, they're designed as these sort of archetypes for one another. And it's very much like you have half of this family. And I found that to be really interesting. The fact that half of this family is extremely divided.
Hmm.
The other half is the polar opposite,
Well,
but
yeah.
almost to a fault. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and like I thought, like the one of the main tenets of the dynamic is that Lucy Liu's character as the mom has a very obvious, strong preference towards her son, as opposed to her daughter, who she kind of writes off her troubles and trauma with as something she just needs to get over, and she just has a very clear preferential treatment towards her son. But I was sitting there watching, and I was thinking that it kind of just an interesting topic to imbue a ghost movie with, and especially one that's like, I feel like I don't see that often in movies. I just wish some of those character dynamics and some of the relationships between the individual family members kind of like tied up a little bit better by the end.
no, I agree.
And I feel, and this is kind of another layer to what's up with this movie, or at least what I've seen people talking about a lot with this movie, is that the dialogue between everyone a lot of times is a little hit and miss. I don't know how you felt about it, but I don't know. The way I feel about movies sometimes is that like as long as it ingratiates me into its world into an effective way, I don't really care. And this movie does kind of have weird stilted dialogue a lot of the times, especially between the teens. But like, you've already kind of got me in this weird ethereal headspace where like I'm the perspective of a ghost and I'm floating around this house in this series of like really like ambitious long wonders, and it's kind of already this, it's like this ghostly idea of being in the house, and so I'm kind of already out of a normal frame of mind watching this. So a lot of times the dialogue didn't really bother me that much. I just thought like the actual scenario needed like a little bit beefing up in a couple extra spots.
I do agree with you because I feel like there are moments where where there's too many things going on within the
Yeah.
narrative. So you have this daughter, Chloe, who's her friend has just died. They're on this massive move. She's feeling very depressed, isolated. You have Ryan, her brother, who is like weirdly the object of his mother's fascination. Felt very similar to the almost dangerous line stepping that like Mary Tyler Moore has in Ordinary People, where
Yeah.
it's like it's beyond a motherly's love. It's almost like a forbidden attraction.
Yes.
Um,
There's
and
one
a,
scene where it seems like she's gonna like kiss him.
yeah, it's like she's about to step over a line that is, but she firmly dances on it, and it's. But again, also like that's a lot of like she's drunk in that moment, and she sees how ambitious and how like and how the opportunities for her son are endless, and she doesn't because she's folded in some sort of it seems like dangerous scheme or real like some sort of deal that we don't really fully know, but
Yeah.
it's one that is they've got a lot of invested in. It could be some shady business there, and Chris Sullivan is like a contractor of some sort, and he's like involved in it, as her husband, and that so they know about this. So you have all that drama mixed in within this entity that comes into the fold, and I think that there's enough drama there that if you know the screenplay is wrapped up like in a way that could be fine. You then throw in there's a guy um that I'm sorry, not Ryan. I'm talking about Tyler is her brother. Ryan is this best friend,
Yes.
uh, popular kid who is also secretly having a relationship with Chloe at the house, and there's a sort of turn that happens with that relationship and that dynamic that bleeds into the third act, and that honestly came out of nowhere.
I agree. I absolutely
And
agree.
the what it's trying to talk about there is it was honestly like a jump way too far. And I think the third act of this movie is predictable and nonsensical at the same time. And when you break it down as to what the reveal of this entity is, while it's going for that emotional moment and you can feel it, when you break it apart afterwards, the movie's sort of world breaks apart as well. I think a little bit. I don't know. I don't know how you felt. I mean, we're not going to go too much into spoilers on it
Yeah, it's kind of hard
because I
to, it's
think
kind
it's because it's hard to. But unless we, it's hard to explain without them. Then we can totally do that.
I think I'll dance around it a little bit. It's a little difficult to dance around, but I think I can. It's just
You know what?
I
Screw it, Trace. Let's just do it.
let's
Talk
okay.
spoilers. Being
I
too nice. We can. We have to talk spoilers about this thing. Like if you don't want to, I'll put it something in the whole thing as well.
Yeah.
And but it's kind of hard not to. This is a movie like embedded with its identity is built around this twist.
It's
And
kind of defined by where it ends in the
yeah,
last act. So yeah, I mean, so I'll say first of all, like this is a screenplay by David Koepp, I think is how you pronounce his name, and he wrote another movie that Soderbergh directed called Kimi.
I love Kimmy.
I love Kimi, and I think that has like a pretty rock solid screenplay. Honestly, it's simple, but it's like rock solid, and
Mm-hmm.
and Soderbergh directs the hell out of it, and so like that's a great movie. This is also, I think this it kind of gets into a weird territory where like this is kind of like the form here is built around kind of like an experimental art house horror movie deal. And so much of the emotions in the early goings kind of complement that. And it's like it's a group of characters like dealing with some really difficult emotions and this tension that exists within the house, along with this ghostly presence that is haunting them. And it kind of like it's almost kind of like manifesting itself like through the difficulties they're having with each other. And so this, despite this presence being in the house, it's kind of it's personified through like really human emotions coming out of its characters. And even in the beginnings, especially with the boyfriend character Ryan, I I wrote it. I wrote down in my notes. I was like, "Wow, this is a movie that like is really taking the emotions of its teenage characters very seriously and earnestly, and expecting you to go along with that as well." And that's where some of that kind of not so great dialogue comes in. There's especially a scene between Chloe and Ryan on a bed where they're talking to each other, and I don't know, Ryan's expression of his emotions can come off very forced and melodramatic to a lot of people. But I was sitting there watching, and I was like, oh, I got this is a movie that kind of expects you to get on its wavelength, and it's just like it's treating these teenagers like real people with real problems, and from their perspective, this is how they feel. And unfortunately, as the movie goes along, the screenplay kind of like simplifies itself down to just being like a serial killer movie basically. And I thought it kind of like undoes some of that goodwill with some of those like really complicated, very earnest emotions it builds up in the early goings. And by the time we get to the last act of Ryan being a serial killer who is like monologuing his intentions to Chloe, who he has drugged on the bed, I was kind of like, okay, we're like in a different movie now. Like this seems like it's like completely out of left field from like the more straightforward genre type of movie that David Kep wrote with like Kimi, and is now kind of imbuing into this, even though this has its own like very separate identity. And so I think there's just moments it has like an identity crisis, and I think that's kind of my problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, it becomes it becomes this movie that's more about um that's more or less than this this whole thing is all about the Ryan's actions and what he did to her friend, as well as also, you know, we see the slow manipulation of this and how it's, if it's a commentary on suburbia, well, Soderbergh's done this before. If it's a commentary on
Hmm.
trust in sex, Soderbergh's done that before easily. If it's just a commentary on youth, which is something that he has done before. He's done all these things before, but it doesn't, you know, add up to really anything here other than a almost just like an interesting twist that doesn't necessarily need to be in here. And it felt really just strange and honestly, it really undercuts a lot of usual things I find in Soderbergh movies to be fascinating, is that these characters aren't so written. His
Hmm.
characters are written more as human beings rather than genre archetypes. And I think that that's what Ryan ended up becoming, because I was like, I was with you. I was like, when he was breaking down, I was like, this is a strange way for someone to break down, but it also like could speak to, I think, millennials, Gen Z, the especially Gen Z. I think that a lot of them right now are struggling with their emotions and trying to find answers to things in the world at such a volatile time period that we live in. And the idea of teen suicides, or the idea of drug overdose on fentanyl or other drugs, or just the idea in general of, school shootings or anything that's going on
Hmm.
in the news, like this is a very dangerous, scary time for kids going to school at all and trying to find their way through suburbia. And I was thinking a lot of like just I was thinking a lot of his earlier films. I was thinking a lot of, the Virgin Suicides. It's Sophia Coppola. As I was watching this film, I was just like, okay, so like he's going to make a horror film, but it's going to speak to something on that. And then when the twist comes and it's really just isolated down to five characters and it becomes like sort of a play, well, then it just then really cheapens it when it becomes like, well, this guy's a serial killer. And it's like, well, okay, that's all right. And then you realize, I think the thing that makes the movie even like beyond dumb is about this third act is the twist that Tyler is the presence.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that the whole time so when you start thinking about shots and scenes and um how the presence is there to protect his sister and laying the foundation of how Tyler's terrible to Chloe and how he speaks to her and Chris Sullivan's character essentially says like you're gonna wish you never wanted to do that, and then it sort of feels like okay, well that was very on the nose, but also like um the way in which it ended felt like the end of like when you complete all the levels at the end of a video game and like like and the camera's going up in the air like he's going to heaven. It felt so heavy handed
It was
in
like
the like
it was like when the whale lifted up to heaven.
exactly, it was very much like that and you're like, oh, you're better than this, like, you know what I mean? And I think like what I like about I don't think it's like a terrible movie,
Yeah.
but the first two-thirds of its execution is really actually kind of fascinating. Its third act completely just kind of falls apart and
Yeah.
it becomes like any sort of like serious underbelly or undertaking of or like thematic themes that he was trying to explore. He really undercuts himself trying to talk about any of them, and
Well,
it's a damn shame because like on a technical level he actually does kind of wonders with the editing and the camera work and um the sort of intrigue of making your camera feel like a ghost. I think I think he is really effective with it. And it's like, fuck, if you had this technique though, in like a movie that was cared more about humans rather than twists, then we would probably have a better product here.
well, it's funny that you talk about the twist because it's not like it's a thing where it's almost like because of the form of the movie, it's almost not even communicated quite well because when the very last twist happens that that it turns out the presence has been the brother the whole time. It almost didn't even register to me as that was what would happen. That was what had happened. What I first thought when the credits rolled was like, oh, he like replaced the presence and he's the presence now. But like after it took a little while after seeing the movie. I was like, wait, no, that doesn't actually make sense. Like he had like just because of the way that the drama plays out and that last scene and him going up to heaven and like the logic that the movie is imparting on you is that no, like he is the presence of the house, but just like again, like you were talking about, it's just like so loose conceptually in the way because of the way that it has to communicate itself. It's just like it comes across kind of like slightly confusing. Though I will say that like for a movie that is kind of built on not being that scary, like not it doesn't really have any traditional scares in it at all because that's just not the type of movie it is. That last minute where Lucy Liu goes up to the mirror and sees him in the mirror. Just the way that shot setup happens and like Lucy Liu's scream and like just the disorienting nature of that whole moment, that scared the shit out of me, actually. I was like very startled by that scene.
The first time when Chloe walks out of the bathroom
Yeah.
and she and the presence um moves all of her stuff over off of her bed and everything. Um and she did scream because it's the first time like there's actually like it feels like the actual dialogue or interaction with it. I got a little startled,
Yeah.
like, and I shouldn't have, but I was just like I was waiting for it to come, and then it came, and I still got scared. But yeah, I mean, when like he's just standing in that mirror at the end, and you're just like, oh god damn it! Like I know, like this is like the thing is like the development of Kimi by the end of that movie, right? Is sort of
Hmm.
slowly building to a giant finale there.
Yes.
But that is contained and smart enough within its set of rules. I go back to rules. I think Soderbergh's big on rules. This is a guy that like he's a tactician
Hmm.
with and he's precise in everything he does. So his movies have genuinely great rules set up within its world. One of my films that we're going to talk about in my top five literally has a scene where he, you know, tells you the rules of what is going to happen there. And through his characters. This movie's rules kind of are made up as their own. That's why I kind of like said it's a little bit of like a Tenet sort of situation where you got to
Right.
go with the vibes and you can't trust the rules, but the rules keep changing in the
Yeah.
third act. And it's only an 85-minute movie and it's not one I'm going to get mad at, but it's definitely not one I'm going to get like excited about. It only just means I'm going to get more frustrated probably with this thing because like I expect a little bit better from Soderbergh,
Mhm.
even from David Nope, who's worked with him here, because Soderbergh does a lot of punch ups on his scripts, his own scripts, and it just felt like he shot this thing in 11 days, and no one stopped to think, man, maybe we've gone a little step too far in terms of this, because on a technical level, it's brilliant, and then on an execution level, it's like very mid tier for him.
Yeah.
And he's just every time he pushes the genre forward, it does usually take a film or two to get in there. Like I remember when he did the iPhone stuff, and he did what is that, Unseen,
Unsane.
Unsane. And I spoiler alert, it's not going to be in my five, but it's a movie that I don't respond to. But then he made High Flying Bird and some other stuff, and I think he got the kinks out of that, and really was able to find like containment within using that sort of camera and technique as well as also just within a story.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But um but yeah, it's not a bad movie, but I do think it is I do think it's kind of disappointing.
I'll say like I mean we've been talking about the negatives of it. Ultimately, like I mostly liked it honestly still
Yeah, I
because
didn't have
I
a
think
it was 85 good minutes of my life, but I
yeah.
still was like, ooh, it was like 5 minutes, 80 minutes good, 5 minutes sort of frustrating.
Yeah, and that's really unfortunate that it just kind of leaves that taste in your mouth. But like the rest of it, like it is a cool experiment, and I just love Soderbergh's style of filmmaking where it feels like he's just like the style of it feels like he's just like someone that has a camera that is just like trying to do the best he can with his resources around him. And I love that element of here where this is just like a long series of one take shots like all throughout the floor plan of this house. I love just thinking of Soderbergh like running up and down the stairs with this camera. I mean, really, he's doing like a steady cam throughout the entire floor plan because it is really smooth. But like, I do love that formal element about it, and I think it's super interesting. And you were talking about how what kind of meditation this movie is, and like how some of it is territory that Soderbergh has covered before. What it kind of read as to me for like so much of that first half is like a meditation on like the intrusive nature of the camera and kind of like being a movie about watching movies and kind of how you have this inherently like prying eye that you're kind of forcing into the lives of these characters and capturing the most difficult emotions that they could feel. Um, and just kind of that voyeuristic quality of making and watching movies, but also like obviously by the end of the movie, the fact that like that same point of view has the capacity to like save the characters that it's kind of like exploiting the emotions of. And so like I think I do think there's something in there to that degree about the camera being the presence basically, which I think is worthwhile. It's just from the plot perspective when you have to break it down to those brass tacks. Yeah, it's like it doesn't really shake out totally by the last 5 minutes.
But I also don't think too like I think you're right. I think like the camera just being the presence is good enough.
Yeah, like
I don't
that's enough. Yeah.
it didn't need to have then the presence actually literally be something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, you know, and yeah, and then the silly drone shot at the end. You know, but because it is contextually, obviously thinking a lot of I thought a lot early on in the film. I was like, man, this feels like a man that's watched a ghost story recently and
Hmm.
is really trying to push the idea of what Lowry's doing there forward and, um, and really find meaning there. And I kind of think that that would have been a better approach because while that ghost there is literally a person, it becomes then something more as that film diverges. I mean, that movie is a masterpiece in
Yeah.
many ways, but, um, yeah, just the ideas here are too fascinating to ignore, but also um, it tries to go beyond that, and I think it should have just stayed in specifically a lane rather than trying to get into all lanes, and then it kind of merges into like the woods by the end a little bit. So,
Yep.
um, but I'm very much looking forward to his next film, which is
Always.
Black Bag, right? Is what it's called, or
I,
Black
I, I,
Hat?
I something like that. I don't
Is it
remember.
which one is it called?
It's
Gosh,
Black Bag.
Black Bag. Okay, I was right. Yeah, which comes out literally in 2 months
Holy
with
shit, really?
with
Like, yeah.
Fassbender and Kate Blanchett and Pierce Brosnan,
That guy's always working, man.
Naomi
Like,
Harris, Tom Burke, uh, Renee John Page. Like there's so many people in this movie. Yeah, it literally comes out on March 14th. So we will be talking about that movie very soon. A bit of a jump up from this budget. The Presence was a $2 million budget. Black Bag, $60 million. Just a little bit of a smidge of a
remember,
jump.
remember when this guy said he was retiring?
Yeah, I mean, like that's, and I think that that's actually a really good point to jump off of. When did he say he was retiring?
It was before Logan Lucky,
Okay.
after I don't know
So
what
it's
the
like right after Side Effects and Behind the Candelabra, right? That was like, yeah.
yeah, I think those were the last
Yeah,
ones
because that's
before he
his
said
four
retiring.
year break right there. And he didn't do Magic Mike XXL, which Trace, I mean, Magic Mike XXL is a masterpiece. And
Amazing. And like he still had it he had his hands all
he
over.
was
He
there.
he edited and
Yeah.
did cinematography, but he technically did not direct it. So
Yeah. It's basically one of his, but we're not going to count it today because he
yeah.
didn't put his name as a director on it. Um, we talked a lot about his films, or just him as a filmmaker, and we talked about this film. So we're here to do his top five, which
Yes.
is he's got a lot of films, a lot of movies here,
A lot of movies.
a lot of movies to really love, a lot of movies that to condense into five is very hard.
It is very difficult.
But I thought that this would be a good exercise for us to do. For anybody out there that has not listened to a top five in a long time, what we do here is Trace will give his. We'll go 5-1. Trace will go first, and then I will do mine. If Trace's five is my three, we will talk about that movie all at the same time. You will hopefully hear as many picks as we can, and then at the end we'll do honorable mentions. So we'll kind of mention some of those ones that just missed off our list. So Trace,
Yep.
no rules for this one, I assume, just movies of Steven Soderbergh's that you love the most. So without further ado, buddy, you're number five.
Yeah, it's like you said, he has a lot of movies, a lot of picks, hard to whittle down. I also have not seen every Steven Soderbergh movie. I tried to do some catch up before this, but I am but a man and cannot
You're not like
watch.
me and have done that exercise already.
Yeah, I haven't gone through the entire Sodiverse.
You haven't had
Um,
enough soda pop. Is how I like to. He's
Pretty
got
good.
34 films. So
Yeah, so it's a lot of movies. So I haven't seen everything. So there's maybe some highlights that I'm missing that won't make my list, and some stuff that I wanted to rewatch that I didn't have time to rewatch either. So this is a top five for me, I'd say.
okay,
But my number five, I had to go with Sex, Lies, and Videotape.
okay,
I had to do it. It's one of the best debuts of all time, maybe. Like it's an amazing movie. I love all the performances, especially obviously James Spader and Andy McDowell, and kind of similar. I think it has a relationship with Presence in a way because it's kind of about the camera and what that how that kind of interprets people's emotions. This is very specific to this movie. Kind of literalizes it, makes it very specific to James Spader's character, and as in relation to love and sex and from that perspective. But I think it's interesting now that I'm thinking about it. It has a movie, and you can look for a better debut, really.
yeah, no, I totally agree. It's my number two Soderbergh film of all time. I think it is a masterpiece, a movie that is also one of the most important independent cinema films, late breaking in the 80s,
Yeah.
heading us straight into the 90s of sort of the 90s independent film renaissance. The winner of the Palme d'Or, very controversial winner of the Palme d'Or. A lot of people thought it would go to Do the Right Thing, and both would be nominated for original screenplay down the road. Fascinating film in terms of, like you mentioned, the relationship to the camera, but also a relationship to oneself in terms of just relationship dynamics, what love is, what is desire, what is, what is security within a relationship.
Yeah.
It is a fascinating film that remains one of those just kind of defining moments. It's a lot like when we're in the middle of the Director Watch series right now, and we're talking about Mike Nichols. And when you watch Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, you feel a cinematic presence that's just born. And when you watch Sex, Lies, and Videotape, you feel like, oh my God, we are going to be now in the hands of somebody that knows kind of what the fuck they're doing. And
Yeah.
it's very much a movie where it's like, man, he is announcing himself early on as a presence, literally
Oh, yeah.
within cinema. So,
I mean, it
um,
really establishes his like, just like his kind of preciseness as a director. It's very,
yep,
it's amazing what he got out of these performers and what he does with just kind of the mood of this movie as like I said, as a debut director. It's really insane. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I can't not have that on the top five.
yeah, exactly. Well, my number five is uh, of the films on this list. It's the most recent film that he has made. And it's a movie that I deeply love, and it's quite topical. It was a movie in 2011. I think we kind of all watched it or rewatched it during the pandemic, and that, of course, is his film Contagion. Um, a movie that when it came out in 2011, I did not understand why nobody was talking about it at the time.
Right.
Truly just a scary, massive ensemble. It felt like almost like Alan Pakula meets Sidney Lumet, sort of like this like wild, thriller about
Yes.
what happens if we have a lethal airborne virus spread around the world.
What can happen?
And I mean, this cast is insane. Marion Cotillard, Matt Damon, Lawrence Fishburne, Jude Law, Kate Winslet, Gwyneth Paltrow, Bryan Cranston, the list goes on. John Hawkes, the list goes on.
Elliot Gould,
Elliot Gould's incredible. Jennifer
Dimitri,
Ely's,
Dimitri Martin for some reason.
yeah, like he's one of like literally the lead scientists
Yeah.
in the lab on it. And it's Soderbergh is one of the people I think that was really at the height of the multi-story, same subject sort of films of the early 2000s. And Traffic is one of those films that
Yeah.
really sort of broke the culture in terms of we're going to make 100 of these. And I do still kind of blame a little bit of Steven Soderbergh for in Traffic for what we then would get with Crash with Paul Haggis a couple of years later. But he's one of the only ones I do think that can actually get this to work and make sense. And this is ripe for a subject matter like that. I think this is one of like Jude Law's best performances I've ever seen him in. He's
Yeah.
playing almost like essentially an Alex Jones like character in this movie. Matt Damon's really incredible in this. Kate Winslet's heartbreaking. Larry Fish being like dynamite in this movie. But yeah, it just like as the pandemic was happening, people were sort of rewatching it. It really did show kind of the blueprint of how our world would react and be in sort of utter chaos and tribalism within this time, within something like this happening. We wouldn't unite. We would essentially kind of divide and we would segment ourselves. And I found that to be back then in 2011 very dramatically resonant. And then now it's become even more topical
Yep.
and now it's true. But it's also just some of his most effective, tense, horrific direction, like the sort of autopsy or like seeing Gwyneth Paltrow succumb to the virus. It is
Yeah.
horrifying. Watching Kate Winslet like slowly die is it's some terrifying shit. I don't know if you've watched it in a while, but it's
Well, Ryan,
it's
it's funny you say that. I was still doing Soderbergh catch up today, and I finished watching this movie within the previous hour. I was watching this movie today. I watched it today. So yeah, this is number 2 on my list.
Okay.
I think this is an amazing movie. And you're absolutely right about both the Gwyneth Paltrow autopsy scene and the Kate Winslet death scene. Absolutely fucking brutal shit to just throw onto audiences because Gwyneth Paltrow dies within the first 15 minutes and then is being like so just grossly operated on in that scene, and fucking her son as well, just immediately within the opening minutes of the movie. It's just like really not saving you from anything that's happening in this movie. And the cut to Kate Winslet in the body bag after she tries to give the other sick person next to her coat, just absolutely brutal. I Yeah, the amazing direction from Steven Soderbergh, and like I was convinced he had edited it because the way so much of this is edited together, so like morosely is so amazing, and he works as his editor so often, but he actually didn't. This was edited by Stephen Mirioni, but this is one of those movies where like I really noticed the editing in a good way because it's stringing along such a series of bleak scenarios together in such a kind of intoxicating way. And such a great thriller, maybe more of a traditional horror movie than Presence is.
I mean, also too, I think Cliff Martinez's sort of like
yes.
score in this movie is so tense, and
One of his best scores, honestly.
One of his best scores. And then one of the most devastating, like sort of heartbreaking moments also too happens when they are able to secure Marion Cotillard from these sort of kidnappers, and you realize they gave them the vaccines that are sort of placebos to these kids.
Yeah,
and she's sort of like kind of actually turned on the captors and created like a bond because understanding why they had to do this so that they could get that. When she's running like down the road, just an incredible, like just heart wrenching yet understandably frustrating moment of how we are as humans. And so it's one of those, like, it's just aged impeccably well, and it's incredibly accurate. And if not to bum everybody out, but I watched recently a clip with Jude Law, and he was talking about this, and he said that when the movie sort of resurged in 2020 and he got on a Zoom with some of the creators and Steven and others, and they were talking with the scientists that helped him with this, they went out and said like, oh yeah, this one, COVID, this isn't the one. So just be prepared for the next one, because that's actually the one that's going to kill us all. So like just, a little bit of like just some happiness to be provided in this episode. Along with you. Trace, you're number 4.
My number 4, I said earlier, I'm kind of partial to Soderbergh's newer period, and honestly, I could have put more newer period movies on this list, and I will say Let Them All Talk, I think, is very underrated and almost made my list. It's not on the list. Number 4 for me is Kimi, which we mentioned earlier. I just think this is such a great kind of like back to basics, sort of like paranoia techno thriller type of deal in the style of like Blowout, or from the voyeuristic angle, like Rear Window, anything like that. Updated for both the high-tech era and the COVID era, and the additional paranoia that all kind of brings on for an agoraphobe who hears something that she's not supposed to hear. And I just love that Soderbergh and David Koepp brought back this genre of movie with such ease. With Soderbergh doing, again, just like more like fun experimental shit with the camera that I love to watch. It almost feels like guerrilla filmmaking sometimes. The way they filmed this when Kimi is outside and the camera's like running to keep up with her and is like trying to keep on pace with her. It's just such an entertaining watch to me, and I think Zoe Kravitz is amazing in this role. And it's less than 90 minutes, such a quick pulpy watch, and I just think it's an ideal version of an update of this type of this very specific type of thriller that I always really enjoy.
His later stage of his career, he's been making so many of these really perfect thrillers that are sort of right in there. It's like in the mid tier of like right in the middle of like the 34 for me. Top, like it's like number 17 literally for me, but like also Yeah, I've only seen it once, so I really want to recatch it. Because I would love to catch up on it again here soon. My number four goes back to, we talked about Traffic, which is celebrating 25 years of being out, and his Oscar win is this year, 25-year anniversary of that film. But he released a better film that year in 2000, and that is a film called Aaron Brockovich, which is again another his legal thriller. Also a biopic. Again, one of just the best, I think one of the best actress wins of all time from and a performance from Julia Roberts. That's her best. Albert Finney's
Yep.
incredible. Um, and sort of this look at this twice divorced mother, who is working in a legal office and takes on this sort of case of injustice from this massive cover up, and it has, I think, someone that is massively influenced on Soderbergh, especially in the thriller genre, is Pakula, and we don't talk
Mhm.
nearly enough about the way in which Soderbergh uses his camera, the way Pakula does on close-ups or wide angle shots, but also the way he builds tension with his characters. And it could be a really fun way he builds the tension, and then in other ways like this, it's a straightforward, really talky drama that when you watch a bunch of these movies like this, it really feels like the modern era of these sort of investigative films have really looked at this movie as a guiding post.
Mhm.
Because I was thinking a lot of movies like Dark Waters or Spotlight.
Yep.
They use all the President's Men, and I think they use this movie. Those filmmakers use this movie too, to how to. This is a movie about a woman finding out that an entire town has been chemical to death and are about to die, and yet it is as entertaining of and quotable and on your edge of your seat sort of thriller, legal thriller as you're ever going to find it. It's a very talky film, and he does it with such great kinetic energy and editing, and his cinematography is out of bounds in this movie, which is really funny because then like the movie that's more critically was celebrated or technically celebrated was Traffic that year, and I think that this is the better film and it's the more accessible film as well too. And it just he dominated right at the beginning of the new millennium, the sort of the conversation, because this was a giant hit. Traffic was a giant hit. He when he can be a massively potent and accessible filmmaker.
Mhm.
And I think though now in his later stages, he's more focused on probably what like a younger man would do. I think a younger person would have made a Kimi or a Presence, and then later in their lives they're making the hits like an Aaron Brockovich. And it's funny that it's sort of inversed on his filmography,
He got it
right?
like out of the way. He's like, all right,
Yeah, he's like, all
I'm
right, I'm
over
gonna make all
that.
my blockbusters late. But yeah, that would be my number four.
No, yeah, absolutely. It's not on my list, but super solid movie. I think part of the reason, I mean, the main reason it's so entertaining, obviously, despite being such a talky drama, is the way Aaron Brockovich is written as a character and Julia
Yeah.
Roberts' performance, just so entertaining. And I especially thought watching it, I just watched it recently for the first time, and watching it with the incoming Trump administration, it felt kind of potent, just being a movie that has such a strong anti-corporate streak, which is nice to see. And
It's
just
got
yeah,
a
like he's
it's got a
uh,
bite to it.
it
That's for
does,
sure.
and just such a strong ensemble. Obviously beautifully shot, like you said. I love the weird. Not weird, I guess, but just very notable kind of warm color grading to this movie. It's
Yeah.
everything's like very orange, which Soderbergh does a lot in a lot of his movies. Actually, a lot
Mhm.
of he has a lot of scenes throughout his movie that just have kind of strange color timing and grading to them, where he's just again doing weird shit with how
Well, I
the
mean,
image looks. But
with Traffic, everything in Mexico just looks yellow, which is now what everybody thinks
yeah,
movies from Mexico
that's
look like.
that's what Mexico looks like.
Exactly, which is kind of surprising because then like Jacques Audiard didn't get the message. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
shows that he didn't do the research. So all right, Trace, you're number three.
My number three is part of a trilogy, full of movies that could maybe honestly occupy the spot. But I'm going with the first Magic Mike movie.
Oh,
Yes. What's funny about this movie is that I actually saw Magic Mike 2 first, and for years never saw the first Magic Mike. All I knew was Magic Mike XXL. And then I had finally seen the first Magic Mike, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And it's a very different movie from XXL a bit. More concerned with like labor and economic precarity. But it's just so it just has such a clear vision about the relationships of its characters and the relationship they have to their labor and like living in the world we do and what you have to do to get by. And it's just I love the vibe of it. It's shot so well. Again, you can say that about every Soderbergh movie pretty much, but it's true. It's just like it's such a pleasure to look at. And every performance here is so entertaining. I can't believe was Matthew McConaughey not nominated for this movie, honestly, because
He was not. He was
like,
not.
just yeah, I mean, you could put
Should have
any
been.
magic. Yeah, it really should have been. Like everyone in this movie's amazing, and like I said, you could put any Magic Mike movie into this spot, except technically XXL, I guess, because Soderbergh didn't direct it. But I even really liked The Last Dance, which people seemed like kind of mild on, but I thought was like a super sweet kind of rounding out of all these movies. And I love tracking Mike Lane as a character. I think he's a really compelling character, and Channing Tatum's great. So yeah, like I would watch this movie anytime. It definitely makes my top five.
It's really fascinating that this movie, which I love it too. I think it's upper tier, top 10 Soderbergh for sure on my list. Just didn't crack the top five. It's so fascinating, and I think it kind of interesting. We'll go with my number three here in a second. Soderbergh's known for just making these very sexy films. He's a very sleek, technical, but also forward, but also just very sensuous director at times. And this movie is marketed as a stripper movie. That's
Yep.
why, and people are like, why the hell is he making a stripper movie? And it just seems like it's a cash grab and everything. And the movie made a crap ton of money. It's like a $7 million budget and made $168 million. So like it made a ton. And yet, like the movie refuses to be as sexy as I think audiences wanted it to be. I think XXL is what you would assume a Magic Mike movie is, and what Magic Mike is actually a movie about the dangers of signing your soul away to the devil for a quick buck and a dance. And I think that that's
Yeah.
actually, and I think that that's also what the third film in the series also tries to kind of explore there too, is what happens in Last Dance when you're like essentially when you're only going back for reasons that are not pure to yourself. And I think that the film's phenomenal. I mean, obviously Tatum taking a lot of this from like Slice of Life and sort of
Hmm.
how he's and building these characters off of that. McConaughey is this is in the middle of the McConaissance, and it's a shining beacon of absolute dynamic work. And I love this film. I remember seeing it in the theater. I was like literally alone, and I was kind of shocked because I thought that it was going to be like this movie that was going to be like super provocative and super sexy and full of dances and stuff like that. And there are those dances and there can be those moments. That's not really what this movie is about. It's not really about the titillation or the sex. It is about the manipulation. And that's why I think it kind of bleeds well with my number three, which is the sexiest movie that Steven Soderbergh has ever directed, and that's Out of Sight,
Yeah.
which is, kind of what I would assume what happens when you put like the two sexiest people in a cat and mouse, crime film up against one another. It just becomes the sexiest movie you're ever going to see. Like Clooney and Lopez are incredible in this movie, an amazing ensemble cast, and it builds a formula. It builds a formula to the commercial, successful, accessible director while also pushing his storytelling and visual senses forward. It is sort of just like this undeniable piece of entertainment that didn't really make a lot of money when it came out, but is nonetheless like to say it is a sexier film than the movie about strippers. You would have to have evidence to it, but like the scene where they're in the hotel room and they're just laughing at each other, jumping on the bed before, and we don't even see any clothes getting taken off at the, or like they're slowly doing it. It's like, okay, cinema hasn't gotten any hotter since then, and like, you know, I can understand why people don't want to make movies about sex, because it kind of like he broke it, like he
Yeah.
broke the mold. And but yet it's also just wonderfully entertaining, and you know, maybe not as thematically deep as some of his other movies, but you know, sometimes you just can't beat a movie that operates at its own rhythm the way that most other films of its sort of genre don't. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so it reminds me a lot of just like, you know, obviously it's a, you know, it's a property that's built off of the back of Elmore Leonard, and that's also, you know, stories like Jackie Brown and other, you know, other films that have been adapted from him. I think it's the best of Leonard's adaptations to screen, and you know, it has Ving Rhames, Don Cheadle, Dennis Ferrer. I mean, like this is a stacked cast, but Clooney, this is the birth of their relationship as well, and they really dominated the early 2000s, the late 90s, early 2000s as a partnership. And yeah, I fucking love this movie. So
Yep. Yeah. I had never seen it before until this year. So it was relatively recent new watch for me. But yeah, I mean, you pretty much covered it. Amazing, amazingly sexy movie too. Just like absolutely on fire movie star leads coming from this movie. And it just like kind of feels like watching it for the first time this year, it just kind of like fits like really snugly into that like that set of movies from the 90s during like the indie filmmaker boom, and it just kind of like carries that like very distinct like super entertaining vibe that a lot of those movies have. It's funny you mentioned that it was from an what's the name of the author? You just said it,
Elmore
and it's
Leonard.
yeah, Elmore Leonard. I was watching and I was like, this is like Jackie Brown. And then I was like,
And
oh,
then
it's
Keaton shows up,
yeah,
and
Keaton shows
and
up as his
it
character.
literally as his character, and yeah,
Yeah, I was literally like, man, this like really reminds me a lot of Jackie Brown. But past just like even the story though, like a lot of just like the vibe of the filmmaking and kind of like a lot of the stylistic choices reminded me of that movie, and it in a very entertaining way. And yeah, it's just what a blast of a movie. You already mentioned like the really stacked cast of actors that are supporting this thing, but my God, like you can't ask for a movie much more from a movie that has Bing Rames, Steve Zahn, Don Cheadle, Catherine Keener, like all these people, Albert Brooks. So, like you can go on and on with this movie, and it's just kind of just so like the way the plot plays out. It's just like clockwork, really. It's super entertaining. Yeah, I love this one too. It's not on my list, but I loved it.
well, also the other thing too that's like what I love about it also, and I sort of revere it. This is a kind of movie that's just not getting made anymore.
Yeah.
And when you see, you know, when they say like, oh, what are like the movies that, you know, from the past that sort of define themselves in here, this feels like the test run for a movie I'll talk about here in a second. That is the ultimate test of like, okay, audiences may not have saw it, but it plays well on cable. Well, let's find the formula in here as well. But there were so many of these movies that were like this. They're sort of like almost like a Tarantino ripoff, essentially. But this is more than that. You know what I mean? Like Scott Frank's screenplay and Soderbergh's direction elevate them beyond the trappings of being caught inside like a ripoff of a Tarantino movie, which, or, you know, which is sort of were revived at this time, these crime comedies. You know, I mean, hell, Tarantino even, like you said, he makes Jackie Brown, which is a Leonard novel, and you know these authors. This author was revered by so many filmmakers to for the best adaptation of his work to come from Soderbergh is truly special. Trace, we're at that point. Your number two was already announced with Contagion, so we are at number one picks. What's your number one?
Oh my God. What are the odds we have the same number one?
I think that the odds might be correct, but we'll see.
Um, Another part of a trilogy. So you can like break it down to another set of movies, I think. But I got to go with the middle chapter, Ocean's 12.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. All right.
that is my pick. I rewatched it yesterday. Perfectly entertaining movie. I think the reason I like it so much is that it perfectly marries Soderbergh's like wide appeal populist movie star style filmmaking with his more like I'm gonna do whatever the fuck I want to do kind of more experimental style filmmaking by just taking uh the Ocean's crew and sending them on vacation and not really having much of a distinct plot to speak of. There is a plot, but this is very much more about enjoying all the fun camera tricks, all the little stylistic flares, just all of these actors just kind of doing goofy, wacky shit with each other over the course of the movie. Um, Obviously, it is not as satisfying as the clockwork precision of Ocean's 11, and I haven't seen Ocean's 13 in a while, so I remember just thinking it was okay. But Ocean's 12 for me is the one where, like, if I think of the Steven Soderbergh movie, that I can go back and watch it and just be like just perfectly entertained for 2 hours. It is Ocean's 12.
Ocean's 12 for me is my number six.
Okay.
It is the movie that it's right outside, and I almost kind of have it there because I didn't want to put two Oceans films on my list.
Yep.
Um, it is one of the greatest anti-sequels of all time, and it's almost an act of defiance.
It
That
really feels like he
sequel.
stole studio money to make this
It
movie.
really feels like he. Now, granted, these movies were hell for him to make.
Mhm.
And so anytime he signed up to make one, he was like literally like wanting to kill himself by the end of these things. But um, I think that this is the most difficult one because, I mean, my number one is Ocean's 11.
Here we
And
go.
Ocean's 11 is, to me, one of the greatest films, the most entertaining films of my lifetime. I don't, it is a perfect movie, like straight up a perfect movie. There is not a
Agreed.
single moment that is wasted in Ocean's 11. And I can watch that film anytime. And it was one of those when it came out, I remember seeing it and I really loved it and I really liked it. I saw it in the theater when it came out when I was a kid. And over time, like it felt like it built because it was on TV so much. And then we're part of the generation that watched stuff on AMC and TNT and all those things growing up, Trace, that like we grew a sort of a reverence for a movie like this, these big ensembles, these fun, just a movie that's fun. And this is before sort of studios took nostalgia and built it to the point where it is now the foundation of modern blockbusters. Like
Hmm.
this is a campy, stupid original film that it is then elevated to a stylized new classic that makes that other one that had Frank's that had the Rat Pack in it. It makes this look like it makes this that movie is doesn't even exist anymore in my opinion because this is like a new generation of actors and that are being highlighted in an ensemble that is elevated by a director that is at the height of his powers in terms
Yes.
of I'm the best director on the planet. I just want an Oscar. I can make an entertaining legal drama. I can make a crime film that's sexy and pulpy. I can make an introspective film about sex and our relationship to media. I can make a movie that is intersecting all these stories with the drug cartel. I can do all these things. So now I can kind of do whatever I want. And I'm going to take a property that was very revered by a certain generation, and I'm going to make it even better and coherent and sexy and sleek and put every single one of the best actors on the planet in it and gamble that this ensemble is going to be one of the best to ever be on screen. Oh, and mind you, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make two more. One that breaks the mold like you're talking about and is the greatest anti-sequel of all time. And then I'm going to make a third film that I still think is fun and entertaining and rich within its own lore and builds on these characters. And then I'm going to stop making these and I'm
Yep.
never going to make them again. And till I come out of retirement and I make a NASCAR version of this. And I think Logan Lucky is such a fascinating movie because it is the There was the announcement this past week that David Leitch is potentially looking at making Ocean's 14, which would be a terrible mistake and should never
Awful.
exist because, I mean, like half this cast has passed away, and um, these are just lightning in a bottle movies. It would be a horrible mistake if they made it. Um, but he already, Soderbergh doesn't need, people were like, where is Soderbergh? Soderbergh doesn't need to make another Ocean's 14. He made Logan Lucky. We actually should get another Logan Lucky if we were lucky about getting something like that. Um, but yeah, I mean, so many quotable lines. Clooney's probably never looked better. Pitt, Damon.
Oh yeah.
You got little Casey Affleck in there. You got Cheadle right before Cheadle sort of even blew up even more in the 2000s. Julia Roberts and Andy Garcia is a wonderful villain. I mean, it's probably the most entertaining blockbuster out like
Ab-
of the last 25 years.
Absolutely. I mean, Ocean's 11 is so perfect and so like pinpoint precise that it could very well be my number one and feel just as right as Ocean's 12.
Yeah.
Or anywhere else on my top five. I just wanted to keep it to one, kind of like you just wanted one of a franchise in the top
No,
five.
I get you.
Yeah. But I like I said, I haven't seen Ocean's 13 in a while, and I owe it a rewatch. But Ocean's 11 and Ocean's 12 for me are just such a perfect, just back to back of just straight, just such fun movie making, such effortless, cool movie making that it's amazing that anyone can make it look this easy. But Soderbergh does it with like the best cast, the best ensemble on the fucking planet. Like it's just such a treat to watch this extensive group of performers interact with each other with two scripts that are so fun in completely separate ways from each other. And like you said, for my end, for Ocean's 12, I just love that he fucked with the audience as hard as he did with Ocean's 12. And I love that this is a movie about enjoying the sights as opposed to trying to keep up with a heist. That's just it, that speaks to me in a different way than Ocean's 11, but they're both perfect movies. It's amazing.
No, for sure. They are indeed perfect movies. I love them both. And Ocean's 12 I think is just one of the funniest movies also too.
Oh yeah.
And just
They're so funny.
and also by the time you get to 12 and even 13, these guys are making fun of one another. They've been around. The sort of evolution of Matt Damon in the Ocean's movies is funny because he actually becomes the biggest star out of these movies by that time because of the elevation of the Bourne franchise, which is funny because like it's funny to say that Matt Damon, who had won an Oscar by this point for writing Good Will Hunting and had been in movies, by the time he gets to Ocean's 11, he's not as a big of a bankable of a star as Pitt or Clooney or these others. And then he has Bourne come out, and it sort of changes the scope of how they're going to use him. And you have Roberts and then Catherine Zeta-Jones in the sequel. And I think Andy Garcia is so much fun in both, and it also just has this great intersection of it's a cast that is diverse but also is not trying to be that. It's just about personalities, and it all blends together. And Soderbergh was just right about finding the right casting and figuring out who was right in this spot and that, and that's what makes those three movies in that trilogy so great, and what made a movie like Ocean's 8 frustrating is that
Yes.
that is lightning in a bottle that you just can't repackage. So the idea of an Ocean's 14 is just a stupid thing. And I think the other thing is David Leitch and he's like Gary Ross, I believe, was the director of Ocean's 8. They're not Soderbergh. They don't have a sense of what he knows to be the best ways to use actors like these and to tap into their sensibilities as movie stars. Like he just knows how to do that better than anybody, like most people as well too. And it all, like you say, he makes it look effortless, even though we all know it was a giant pain in the ass to make those movies. And rightfully so, because you have to be, again, obsessive about being precise, because if anybody like watches a heist movie, like those movies can fall apart very easily if you have twists and turns like the Ocean movies do have. So Trace, were there some honorable mentions or some movies that just missed the cut of making the five for you?
Yeah, some let me look here. I of ones I watched recently, like I said, I think Let Them All Talk is incredibly
Yeah.
underrated. I love that movie, and again, kind of just like him doing another weird shoot. And I love that it's like so heavily improv, and I kind of love just hanging out with those actors for 2 hours and think they're doing a great job in that movie. I like Haywire a lot. Very cool. Unfortunate about the lead actress, but very, very neat action stuff going on. And I'm surprised Soderbergh has not returned to that genre more often with how, again, effortless he makes it look in that movie.
I think that that's what Black Bag is. It's like a return to the sort of spy genre
Let's go.
there. Yeah,
Let's
so there
go.
we
We're
go.
back. And I'd say I really like Unsane as well, and I really like his Solaris. I like his
Yeah.
Solaris remake. Yeah,
I underrated picture of his is the Limey.
I haven't
Uh,
seen it.
yeah. I think you'll really like it. I don't know if you ever seen The Informant?
That's another one I haven't seen.
By Damon. Truly one of Damon's best performances. Like my number 20 on the list, but like an insanely comedic and frustrating performance from Matt Damon, like in the most complimentary way I could ever say that. Like he basically plays this just habitual liar throughout the entire time, and
Okay.
and he's incredible in it. Um, his duo films of Che that he did with Benicio del Toro.
Hmm.
They were the first ever Criterions I ever owned. So that's at least my connection.
There
Like
you go.
my obsession started with Steven Soderbergh, and I think his biopic Behind the Candelabra on HBO with Damon and Michael Douglas playing Liberace. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Oh,
That is two great performances and an insane performance from Rob Lowe. I think you would it would be very interesting. It's a very detailed account of Liberace and Matt Damon's characters plays Scott and sort of their on and off love affair over a course of a couple of years.
okay.
Let them all talk. Just watch it for Candice Bergen alone. And her tear Meryl Streep apart.
Yeah.
Um, Logan Lucky, I already mentioned that. Lastly, this one was number 7. It was like right there too. It's one of the recent films that I'm the most high on, and that's High Flying Bird.
Yep.
I think that is a phenomenal film from 2019 because he had 2 films in 2019. He made one of the best films of the year in High Flying Bird, and he made his worst movie he's ever made, which is The Laundromat, which is a fucking terrible movie.
Yeah, I have not
Uh,
seen that movie, but I have not
uh,
heard good things.
don't. Like if you know what I mean, like it's one of those where it's like, please don't. It's as if Steven Soderbergh made an Adam McKay movie.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm out.
It's bad.
But I do like High Flying Bird.
Yeah, exactly. But High Flying Bird, I think a really fascinating movie speaking about really a very interesting movie talking about athletes. And I find sports right now to be just in this weird place of athletes' relationships, agents, how they're able to use their name and likeness. It's such a fascinating topic right now. Absolutely incredible script written by Troy Alvin McCraney, who co-wrote and won the Oscar for Moonlight. So, and then uses like real life, appearances from basketball players. It was like, it was honestly, it was like watching Steven Soderbergh make a Spike Lee movie,
Hmm.
and but also have his own signature sort of technical flair and this incredible performance by Andre Holland inside of it, who I just think is one of our great actors if we give him a shot to do stuff. So yeah, that's Steven Soderbergh. We got one more film from him coming out this year in Black Bag. We might have another one.
Oh my
Uh,
God.
we might have a third one depending on if he gets it filmed in time. It's like a black comedy with James Corden. I think Issa Rae is who it is. I want to say that that's right. I could be wrong. I'm going to double check.
He also has some other movie with Michael Cera that seems like some people have seen it. Maybe it's played some festivals, but called Command Z. And I don't know when that's supposed to get some kind of release, but
Man, he has got so much shit going on right now.
yeah. Again, remember when he retired?
Well, that was like the thing too. It's like he was going to retire, and then he was just like, nope, I'm not going to do that at all. Right? Like I,
Yeah.
which I never fully believed. It's the Christophers. It does look
Okay.
like it is in pre-production. Uh, it's no, it's not Issa Rae. I do apologize. It's Michaela Cole, James Corden, and Ian McKellen
Hmm.
is who it is. That's an interesting group. The Falls, the estranged children of a famous artist, as they hire a forger to complete his unfinished work so they can be discovered and sold after his death. That's interesting.
Okay.
It's billed as a comedy, and the screenplay is from Ed Solomon, and Ed Solomon wrote No Sudden Move with
Another
him.
one I liked.
Another one I really liked. Oh, Cheadle and Benicio are so good in that movie.
Yep.
Great little Damon cameo in that one as well too. But yes, um, I remember when that man retired. Now he makes like a movie a week. It seems like so.
Well, we're
Um,
better off for it.
we are deeply better off for it. Trace wasn't so painful, was it?
No, it
This
felt
episode
good.
it felt good. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet, buddy?
Yep. You can find me, you can find my work at places like AwardsWatch, but also Paste Magazine and AV Club. And you can find myself mostly on Blue Sky now at Trace Sauveur and Letterboxd at Trace Sauveur.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77, also on Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, we have the Director Watch podcast. This week's episode is continuing our Mike Nichols movie series, and we're talking about the film Carnal Knowledge. And it was a really great episode. I hope you all check it out. 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify. We greatly appreciate that. While you're on the website, please sign up for the newsletter. It's the best place to get all of our news, reviews, interviews, and podcasts all under one roof. Next week, we will be actually back. We're actually going to be doing an Oscar retrospective next week, which will be great. And we're going to be talking about the year 2000. It's 25 years old. And we are going to be talking about those films inside of Steven Soderbergh's filmography, well as many others, as well as the film that won itself that year, which was Gladiator from Ridley Scott. So it should be a fascinating discussion on those films, as well as also seeing what movies we replace and what we don't. Should be a fun Oscar retrospective next week. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll see you all next time.